beautiful meditation. We could feel the core gently settling, especially after we took care of the sound. It's wonderful to be able to breathe together and to have this collective energy. I think I'm right in thinking that this was one of our first events to fill up, to sell out. And I'm curious because mostly it was by word of mouth. So I just wonder how many of us here are have been to the Sanghas here in Nijmegen. How many of us have been to the... Okay, so it could be more half, around half. Okay. For how many of you is this your first time to see monks and nuns in Thich Nhat Hanh's tradition in our community? Okay, for about a third of you. Hello. Sometimes people visit us in our monastery in Plum Village in southwest France, and sometimes we have a chance to tour around, and it's always lovely to meet you all for the first time. We've been giving different talks on different themes over the last couple of weeks. When we were in Amsterdam on Thursday, we were exploring more the theme of peace. And today I would like to develop some of the teachings that we have shared and speak more about Zen and the art of saving the planet. So for those of you for whom this is your first talk, please bear with me and enjoy the ride. And the other talks have been uploaded, I think, to the YouTube channel, so you can, if you're inspired by today, you can go backwards and listen to some of the other talks. But I hope also you can follow, so it's nothing tricky. As some of you may know, we have recently released a book called Zen and the Art of Saving the Planet. And it has now been released also in Dutch. And this is some of our teachers' deepest teachings on ecology and engaged action. How we can respond to our current crises, which express themselves in our planetary crisis. How we can respond, how we can contribute, and what kind of vision our teacher has from the insights of Zen Buddhism towards building a more beautiful future, not only for humans but for all species. And in the retreat that we held last weekend, we spoke about a very important sutra called the Diamond Sutra. And this is one of the oldest texts on deep ecology. Some people call it the first text on deep ecology that humans ever produced. And a fun fact is that it is also the oldest printed document in the world. Woodblock printing of Chinese characters on a very special kind of homemade paper. And I regret to say that it is in London, which is not its true home, in the British Museum. I'm sorry. But it means that if you ever visit London, you can also see this very, very beautiful and old document. And so when we think, what has Zen got to do with engaged action, this sutra is the key to it, because it offers some radical insights that can inform our action and our whole way of seeing things. In the Buddhist tradition, we say that the way we see things, the way we see the world, is very, very important. What we call right view or insight. And when we can see the world with fresh and clear eyes, then we will know what to do and what not to do to help. And that is why meditation is important. Sometimes we want to jump right away to action. And if you're like me, you might want to join protests and already see how in your daily life all the actions you can take that are the right action, that are proportionate and responsible and effective. And we can be taking all of those actions, and yet we still suffer and we still struggle, and we can really burn ourselves out if we don't have the right way of seeing the situation. And in the Diamond Sutra, it offers what's known as the insight of interbeing, or deep interconnectedness between all that is. And in the book and in our teacher's teaching, we need to cultivate this insight of interbeing to allow our actions to come from the right place and to be able to generate the energy that can drive our actions. So everything depends on what we could call this radical insight of interbeing. And in the Diamond Sutra, it shares or proposes 4 ideas that we have to transcend. The first is the idea that we are a separate self, that we are an individual, completely separate from the person to our left and our right, separate from our ancestors and our descendants. We're somehow a kind of fixed, permanent self who has rights that we need to defend. We have possessions that are our own. And this is the first idea to let go of, the idea somehow that we're a separate self. And the second idea to let go of is the idea that humans are somehow special, that we have a special right maybe to exploit the planet, or that we are somehow something separate from the planet that is like a virus on the planet or the problem. And we can even, many of us may even resent or have some hatred towards humans without even really realizing it. We like to be with the trees and with the natural wonders, but we struggle to be with all these humans, people around us. And there's a lot of deep things we can discover when we look into this discrimination we have between humans and other species, and humans and the natural world. And so for more than 1,300 years, Buddhism has been questioning this. Don't think that we're so special. Look more deeply and we will see something else. So we're not a separate individual. We should question whether humans are so as separate as we think. And the third concept is about living beings. Sometimes we distinguish between what is alive and what is inert. Inert, this is like a technical term sometimes we have in physics or science, inert matter. And a lot of researchers get very interested. Why is this inert matter and why is this alive? How did the first living cell manifest on Earth from inert matter? That's a big question in science. And the amazing thing is they can't pinpoint one moment. And in Buddhism, we question this discrimination between something being alive and something being inert. So we cherish the water, we cherish air, we cherish the earth, and we train ourselves to see everything as part of life. We know very well we can't have our living bodies without water, we can't have any life without water, and yet we say water is not alive. we somehow try to make a boundary, and that's a discrimination in the mind. And this is very important when we want to be able to take action to protect the planet, to not discriminate between living and inert. And the fourth idea that this sutra proposes is that it's very important not to think that we just have this one lifespan, that when we die, it's all over. And some of you may be sitting here and thinking, yeah, I knew the Buddhists believe in reincarnation. Actually, in our tradition, we are not so much in the idea of reincarnating a separate, kind of continuous soul. It's not that one soul kind of wears the clothes of one body and then that soul moves into another body, because of the first principle, which is we don't have a separate permanent self. So for us, when we speak about not having one lifespan, it is to understand that what we are living now is the fruit of many, many generations of evolution. If you want to play that game, we can visualize evolution, that the eyes that you're looking at me with now and the eyes I'm looking at you with, these eyes have been evolved over millennia. The warmth, each of our bodies are quite warm right now. We could ask the question, when did the warmth of my body begin? Because of course we borrowed it from our mother, and then goes back many millennia. Our bodies have been warm for a long, long time. And we can play many games like this to see that what we think we have in this moment has very, very deep roots. And when we look forward into the future, we know that, according to science, we say there's Lavoisier's phrase, nothing is lost, it only transforms. It's one of the rules of thermodynamics. You cannot destroy matter and energy, it can only be transformed. And this also applies to us as humans. Our actions continuous. They are our continuation. So what we might say radiates out into the world through the people who hear us or read what we write. What we do as an action, it also continues us. Our teacher once gave the example of a candle that is radiating light in many directions, and we don't wait to ask when the candle has burnt down, where has the candle gone? Because that light from the candle was radiating out throughout the whole time of the candle burning. And our life is the same. We already have many, many continuations from everything we have been thinking, saying, and doing. And that continues us, whether this physical body is still here or not. So this is how we understand not being limited by this lifespan. I just want to say these four concepts: not having a separate self, not thinking of human beings as particularly special, not discriminating between living beings and inert matter, and not being limited to this lifespan. These are the Zen insights that can help us the most in our aspirations to protect our beautiful planet. Based on what these insights, we can describe them as the insight of interbeing, the interbeing of life and all that is. We can cut through a lot of our wrong perceptions that are obstacles to action. We can cut through a lot of wrong views that get in our way, that prevent us from being able to transform our way of living and our way of being. Sometimes people appreciate coming to meditation and mindfulness events, and sometimes even Buddhist teachings, because we'll feel better. I know it will be a nice experience, it'll be very pleasant, and by the end of the day I will feel a bit better. I will feel more relaxed and more at ease. It is true that this is the first step. We want to be able to take care of our body and mind so that our mind can be clear, and so that we're not driven by discomfort in our body and in a reactive state, but we're master of our body and mind. So feeling a bit better is the first step, a bit like how we all felt a little bit better after the meditation. Unfortunately, I don't know if any of you came here just to feel better. I also sometimes have the impression maybe someone would like us to say things that would make us feel better, but wouldn't involve any action on your part to change anything in your life. So I want to have a disclaimer now before I continue to speak, that I cannot say anything to you to make you feel better about the state of our planet that does not involve you changing your way of living and being. Everything I say, everything we share, all the practices we will do today, if we practice them deeply, they will enable us to change our life. And we can't sit here and think that we can only meditate our way out of our planetary crisis. It's simply not possible. The only thing that will help is if, as individuals and as a society, we change our way of living based on our way of seeing and being and doing things. And that is possible today. So there's a dynamism in our teaching. I just want to make that very clear. Maybe we can enjoy the sound of the bell, and we can be aware of our breathing flowing in and flowing out. This morning I'd like to speak about a few things. I'd like to speak a little bit more about Zen, and what we mean by Zen, and what Zen might mean for you. I'd like to speak about art, the art of living, the art of saving and protecting the planet. I'd also like to speak about love, very important topic, and dreams. And also about collective action. Hopefully I will get through all of these. For some of us, the word Zen may be a bit confronting. there are some of us, maybe our friends say, oh, you're very zen, you're very calm. I think there are people who are naturally born calm and zen. And if you're one of those, congratulations, wonderful. And there are others of us where this is something that we need to actively cultivate. And the word Zen, it means stillness, calm. We could also say a kind of serenity, a kind of peace and stillness. And often we associate it with the sitting meditation position, which is true. But we can also touch this kind of fragrance of Zen in different postures and different actions. It is possible to prepare food with simplicity and the spirit of Zen concentration awareness. It is possible to walk with this quality of concentration and stillness even. It is possible to listen to someone else with the energy of peace and stillness. And in our teacher's teachings and in the book, we invite everyone to explore whether you have enough peace and stillness in your daily life. Moments when we can feel completely free and at ease, when there is nothing to do and nowhere to go. Sometimes our teacher described the feeling of sitting on our meditation cushion either in the meditation hall or at home. Is that feeling when you come back after a long day out of the house, maybe you did some shopping on the way home, you come through the door, you put the bags down, you sit on a chair, maybe with a cup of tea or coffee, and you go, ah. This is a very particular feeling. It's a feeling of arrival, letting go, putting down the burden. And this is one of the ingredients of the kind of peace and stillness that we want to cultivate, that feeling of inside, which after a few minutes gives rise to a feeling of it's a little bit higher, it's kind of like more awake. Maybe you start then to realize, oh, the birds are singing, the leaves are a beautiful green in the early spring, there's a wonderful breeze. And so from the arrival, we open up a kind of spirit of awakening to the world around us. Having a little bit of Zen in our day is a question of maybe organizing. In a sense, we need to make time. We need to make conscious decisions. If you think it will happen accidentally, it won't, because unfortunately we don't live in a Zen society. So society is not giving us these moments. We have to fight for them, we have to create them. So we may need to think about how we could have different moments in our day where we could sit and breathe for 10 minutes. Maybe it involves setting our alarm a little bit earlier. Maybe it involves saying no to other things in order to say yes to stillness and peace. I used to live and work in London, and I had quite a hectic life because I worked in news journalism. And for me, my entry to the practice of mindfulness was not sitting meditation. My favorite practice was walking meditation. And I found a stretch through the city of London where every day, walking to work and back from work, I would walk that stretch in mindfulness. And for some people, we can have what we call like Zen activities. The things that you do when you feel completely concentrated and at peace. It could be playing sports or jogging. It could be gardening. It could be baking bread or even doing yoga for those of us that have a yoga practice. Moments when we are not in our thinking mind. And it's very important to make sure you have enough Zen activities that you make time for, that give you joy, that give you peace, and that allow us to develop our concentration. We know that our devices are destroying our peace, eating into it in many ways. And so we actively need to find things that we love to do that help us develop our concentration. Because one of the deepest skills we can develop is the capacity to be with, to breathe with, and to sit with uncomfortable and painful feelings so that we can embrace them, look deeply into them, handle and transform them. And it takes a kind of sitting power. Our teacher used to describe it as froglessness. Froglessness. He said, imagine you have a frog, I don't know how you say it. Kicker. One of those. Imagine it's on a plate, and if you put it on a plate right away, it'll jump off. And many of us, when we sit still and we try not to look at our phone, we are like the frog, except maybe the frog is our fingers reaching for our phone. So we want to be able to cultivate froglessness, not being a frog, to be able to sit still even when something is uncomfortable inside. And of course also when something is beautiful, like the sunset or sunrise or a beautiful tree in bloom. So please think about what is your most Zen activity that you enjoy doing, and can you do more of it? And another thing that our teacher invites us to do is to transform something that we think of as lost time, a chore, something we have to do, into something that can be a Zen activity. And as some of you may know, one of these things is brushing our teeth. It's not something to get over with quickly. It's not something that just has to be done. It's something where we can fully enjoy the experience of having teeth to brush, of being able to look in the mirror and know we are still alive, being able to enjoy having a body and an arm, hand that can brush our teeth, having water to be able to brush our teeth. Another one that could be considered a chore is, for those of us who have to start going back to work, is the commute. If we have a commute. Here in the Netherlands, many of you can commute by bicycle, which is wonderful. That is also a Zen activity, cycling. But if we have to be on a bus or a train, I used to take the bus or tube often across London. And I met a nun on a retreat before I ordained. And I said, how on earth can I keep this peace when I'm back in the city? And she said, whenever you sit on, well, she asked, how do you get to work? And I said, oh, often by bus. And she was the one who said, whenever you sit on the bus, try not to listen to music or read a magazine or newspaper, but just sit there and follow your breathing and be present for the people and everything going on around you. And I have to say, I took her action to heart. I did this, and it completely transformed my experience of London. I started to fall in love with the city from my seat on the bus. And I had wonderful interactions, always, with so many people around me. So we can transform something that feels like a not pleasant experience into something that can really be a Zen activity in our daily life. And this nun was also the one who said, and get off your bus a few stops early so you can enjoy walking meditation along a 200-meter distance. And I also put that into practice, and that was a wonderful, wonderful practice. For some of us, we may think of meditation as something that happens in an app. I don't know here in the Netherlands, but in the UK and America, there's an app called Headspace and another one called Calm, and they're very popular. And so we start to measure our mindfulness in minutes, and we also, we may have a tendency to give up mindfulness, give up our time to the voice in the app. That instead of really having time for ourselves, we think it's something to do, and we kind of do an exercise. If we would like to have and establish a regular practice of sitting meditation in our daily life, because we think we would enjoy this peace and calm, one of the most important conditions we can create is to make a beautiful corner where we can always sit. Don't think that each time you have to grab a cushion or find a place or move some junk away or something like that. Our teacher said we have to create a corner where we always know we can sit and breathe. And we can, he said, to make use of external conditions to inspire our meditation and our breathing and our peace. And this is also why we speak about the art of mindfulness. In the pandemic, we started offering online retreats because we were not able to keep the monastery open. And we explained to everyone how you can create a little altar from an old box or a shelf and place some beautiful flowers on the altar or some fresh leaves from the garden, maybe a candle, and photos of things that inspire us. Photos of things that remind us that we are not a separate self. So it could be photos of our grandparents, photos of beautiful parts of the world, the natural world that inspire us. So we have a corner where we come to sit and to breathe, a cushion that is comfortable, and we use our external environment to be a condition for our meditation. Having a regular meditation practice is not only about willpower. If we use too much willpower, it becomes like hard work. Instead, like an artist, we gently gather the conditions, creating some space in the day, creating an inspiring corner. For me, meditation was not easy because my day was so full of chaos and words and stress. So for me, I would come home from work, and the first thing I did was went to my bed to lie down and practice a relaxation, a kind of body scan. And I would really try and concentrate 100% on my breathing at the belly. Often I'd lie down with my hands on my belly. And I learned to do this because I had a partner at the time, and if I brought the stress of the newsroom back home, it wasn't very welcoming or inspiring for him. He was a musician and a composer, so he didn't want a toxic newsroom drama coming into his inspiring space. So I learned to come home and to practice deep belly breathing and to relax my body for 10 or 15 minutes. That was my Zen activity, to completely let go of the stress of the day, and if there was something I was still holding on to, I tried to see if I could let it go myself without needing to offload it onto my partner. And I think it was very helpful for the relationship that I did this. And I used the practice of walking meditation as well. I told myself that the body is also a Dharma door. Like my way to sitting is also to make peace with my body. If we're not at peace with our body, it can be very uncomfortable to sit or to try and sit in meditation, because actually there's a kind of battle going on inside with our body. So if you are like me and sitting meditation doesn't come easily, we can focus more our time on relaxing, maybe in the lying position, or practicing walking meditation. But each one of us, if we want to be able to be of service to society, to other humans, to the planet, we need these moments in our day, moments of calm, of ease, of not thinking, moments of beauty and stillness. We can enjoy another such moment as we listen to a sound of the bell and see if we can have a moment with this sound of the bell. I'd also like to speak about art, or the art of living, the art of meditating. I wonder if anyone here has heard of the architect called Christopher Alexander. Oh, wow. Okay, there's an amazing architect called Christopher Alexander. He passed away earlier this year. And he was fascinated by spaces and places that humans find beautiful, that our bodies and consciousness find beautiful. And he identified what true beauty is as a feeling rather than an intellectual idea. So he would ask people to stand in front of different buildings, and the question he came up with that was the most reliable test of whether this is a beautiful building or a beautiful image was, which building makes you feel more whole, makes you feel more whole? This was his question for beauty. We had a chance on Friday to visit the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam. And this is also a wonderful question that we can ask of artworks in front of us. Does it make me feel whole? And when we compare different kinds of image, we can ask this. And this is a wonderful question we can think of when we think of our living space and we're having to make decisions, how much to have, what to have, what would make me feel whole, and if I have this or if I take it away, which is better? How can we live simply and with beauty? And this is a wonderful criteria. And then he went further, so based on all his research with thousands of people, he tried to identify what were the characteristics of these buildings or artworks that made people feel more whole. And he came up with 15 principles, 15 properties of beauty, which is, I want to just share a few of them with you today, but you can look them up online and explore his work. He's a very inspiring person. Some of the characteristics of beauty are positive space, space that is embracing, that is kind of circular, not a negative corner, like a kind of leftover space, but actively a positive space. Something that has good boundaries, something that has strong centers, something that has simplicity and inner calm. Interestingly, something that has a little bit of roughness, not perfection, but roughness, rough edges, not too regular. And something, he says, it's beautiful if something has a kind of void, something mysterious, a sort of emptiness inside. I'm just going to lift up one of these flowers and we will see. So, we have a beautiful flower here. Positive space, it has a beautiful shape. It has clear boundaries between the different elements of the flower. It has a strong center, which could also be almost a void, perhaps. Roughness, there's some beautiful imperfections. And these are the kind of qualities that we want to create in a place that is inspiring for us to breathe and sit. Thank you. Some other qualities that he speaks about, one of them is alternating repetition and symmetry. So when we speak about the art of mindful living, it also has something to do with our program. How are we living our life? In the monastery, we have a lot of alternating repetition and a lot of symmetry. We have a monastery schedule. We don't expect others out in the world when we are juggling our lives to have this kind of schedule. But maybe we need a certain rhythm in our day. That rhythm can be beautiful, to find ways that our rhythm is connected to the sun, to the seasons. If we can train our body that every day between 7 and 7:15 we sit and breathe with the morning light, our body remembers that for us. And we can create these beautiful moments in our day that our body starts to be thirsty for, because the repetition, the symmetry, our body also appreciates that. And it helps if we, how we are consuming also has something to do with how peacefully we can sit. Don't have a heavy dinner and then try and practice sitting meditation. It will be very, very difficult and we will fall asleep. So it's very nice to practice breathing and sitting before breakfast, when the body is alert and the mind is a little bit clear. And it's very helpful to have some regularity, just like in the natural world. If we're an activist, we may think, I don't have time to sit. I don't have time to do this kind of thing. It's not important. I'll only do it if it will help. What's the effectiveness of this? When we were having some difficulties in our temple in Vietnam, Vietnam is still a communist country, and our teacher was exiled for almost 4 decades. And when the government ended his exile and allowed him to return, we opened a very big monastery in Vietnam. and more than 500 young people came to practice there. And that was too many for the communist government. I think they were hoping there would only be 50. But there were 500 in just a year or two, and that was too much. So they closed down the monastery, and the monks and nuns were forcibly dispersed and had to find shelter in other temples. And it was a very, very difficult moment for our community. This is about 14 years ago. And our teacher, Zen master, he wrote them letters, sometimes 2 letters a week, to try to keep their spirits positive and calm. And in a very, very difficult moment, when they had been let's say, terrorized by the authorities, he wrote this letter, and the final line, it really touched me. He said, my dear students, and always please remember to live each day beautifully. And the whole letter was, full of courage and spirit and strength, and it was very, very impressive. But my tears came with the final line. My dear students, please remember to live each day beautifully. And I was working on the English translation of this, and I came to this line of, wow. How he could ask that of these young people who were really, whose lives were in danger and whose freedom was in danger and whose human rights were being taken away. And this line has really stayed with me. Can we live each day beautifully? And my feelings around it have changed, because I've also seen that sometimes the most resistant act in such an ugly and unjust world, it is an act of resistance to live a day in beauty, to live a day in peace and kindness. That is already a kind of act of resistance. In the book, Zen and the Art of Saving the Planet, there's a line from our teacher that says, the spirit of Zen is to reclaim our freedom, our sovereignty from the machines and systems of our own creation. To reclaim our freedom, to sit and breathe for 15 minutes, to create a zone of beauty where we live, in our home, to balance our day in a beautiful way so that there is peace and freshness, inspiration and kindness. This is already an act of resistance, because the systems push us in another direction. The machines of our creation, the computers, the technology, our military, industrial complex and society, they're not interested in beauty, in simplicity and in peace. And yet it's kind of an essential ingredient of allowing ourselves to live the wonder of life, allowing the earth in us, in the earth that has created this human body that we are enjoying now, to allow that earth to be a beautiful being, if only for a few minutes, to allow the earth in us to sing and to touch peace, just as the trees touch peace. They don't need to go anywhere or do anything. They can sing their song of spring through the leaves or through their blossom. And each one of us, we also have that right to reclaim our sovereignty as a wonderful living being, as the earth expressing herself. So we are not peaceful as a means to an end. We don't cultivate peace in order that we can do something else, in order that we don't burn out, in order that we can act more. It may be the case that if we have peace, we can sustain ourselves longer. But in fact, we want to touch peace and beauty as an end in itself, as something, as an expression of what it means to be alive, to have a chance to be a human in this moment. In 200 years, do we hope that young people will know how to enjoy the bird song? What would it be if people had forgotten how to enjoy birdsong in 200 years' time? But now, do we allow ourselves to really enjoy birdsong? Or are we already the generation that has forgotten to enjoy birdsong? And what does that mean for what it is, this miracle of life? This miraculous manifestation at this moment. In Buddhism, we like to contemplate deep time, deep time, time going far back and time going far forward. I'm one of the young people who likes dinosaurs. Dinosaurs in Dutch.
Dinosaurussen.
I love reading about dinosaurs. I love all the dinosaur discoveries. I love all their shapes, all their characteristics. I love the fact they had feathers. Dinosaurs are just so amazing, and they were huge because our planet had a different past. It had more oxygen. We had a completely different ecosystem. And every time I touch my love of the dinosaurs, I also practice to see that because the dinosaurs no longer are there, that is why humans are possible, right? There's no way we can coexist with dinosaurs. So it's very interesting that in the planet's different expressions of life, we now have this human expression. And in the past they had the dinosaur version. And in the future, a few million years, maybe there will be another version. So we better enjoy this one right now. It's our turn to enjoy having eyes to see like this, ears to hear. It's our chance to enjoy the bird song. And as some of us know, the birds are the closest living relatives of dinosaurs. So they are saying something very complicated and very deep. They have been around a lot longer than Homo sapiens. But it's our turn to enjoy what we can and to use our action as we can in this moment. We can enjoy the sound of the bell that is made of metals from the earth that may be formed a long, long time ago. So this is an earth song, a song from rock. So I've spoken a bit about Zen and art, and now I would like to speak about love our tradition, the energy of love is very, very important in our engaged action. And for our teacher, it is specifically important for any actions we would like to take to protect the earth. I mentioned in Amsterdam, in the public talk there, that in the 1980s and 90s, our teacher was trying to help people wake up to the suffering that was not so obvious then as it is now. And he invited practitioners, meditators, to listen to the sound of the earth crying in our heart. Listen to the sound of the earth crying in our heart. This was his message in the 80s and 90s. And then in the 2010s, Tai went a bit further. He changed his message because maybe we are quite aware of the earth crying in our heart. And in around 2011-12, he said, we need to fall in love with the earth. Each one of us needs to fall in love with this planet, with all species on the planet, and the planet as a kind of living organism. To fall in love. He didn't say cultivate love. He said fall in love. To behold, we have this word in English, to behold, to contemplate, to savor, to look deeply, so deeply into something that the awe was awesome, or the wonder is so deep that love is born in our hearts, like a kind of flowing love in our hearts. It's important for us to be able to wake up to the wonder that is life. It's the first aspect. This is important for awakening. Love and awakening are really connected. If we can't see the wonder of life, we're not yet awake. Our eyes are maybe clouded by our despair, by our fear, our anxiety. And love can help clear some of those clouds, that we see that the wonder and the beauty is still there. And love is a very, very important energizing force for action. Love motivated by action can sustain itself so much more than action motivated by fear, by anger. And love is interesting because when we care for someone we love, we kind of don't measure anymore. Especially at the beginning of a relationship, when you fall in love, you're not measuring how much time you're spending with them or how long it takes you to travel to see them. We don't measure anymore. Like, love is kind of unconditional and boundless. And that's the kind of love we want to cultivate for our planet, for the living earth. So, a question, as a practitioner, as someone who might care about the planet, we might ask ourselves, how am I actively nurturing my love for the earth? You can imagine this as another kind of homework coming back from our practice today. During this week and next weekend, you can really ask yourself, what are the moments in my day when I allow myself to love the earth? How could I create more of them? Do I love the earth enough yet? That is a good question. Perhaps we could choose a tree near to where we live, a tree we might have noticed and said, oh, that's a nice tree. But maybe you take that tree as the object of your love, and you do everything to fall in love with that tree, to understand what species it is, what characteristics it has, its energy when it's budding with new leaf or with its seeds, which other species are taking refuge in that tree. Sometimes on a tree you can see the difficult journey it has gone on, from the limbs, the arms, the branches it has lost, and how it has adapted. Each one of us, I think, I will speak for myself, I have found it very powerful to allow myself to be more tender towards the earth. To allow myself to see that a tree is not fuel. It's as a child we used to have to go and collect wood for the winter in the forest. So you see a tree is somehow fuel. Yeah. But to allow myself to see that a tree is a real miracle, a wonder. To allow myself to understand the struggles and challenges of a tree. Our teacher was quite a scholar, and he loved reading about science and nature. And in the last few years, there have been so many incredible books that we can read to learn more about the miracle of trees. I promise to. I have a reading list link that I can send to the organizers, so maybe after this session we can have some recommended books to help you fall in love with trees. And I hope many of them have been translated into Dutch already. The insight of interbeing helps us respect and cherish the natural world and see our delicate, tender, gentle interrelationship with the natural world. I don't know if anyone here is afraid of spiders or bees. If we can apply the insight of interbeing to our life, it would mean that we relate differently to insects. And since I was a teenager, I have really enjoyed saving bugs and insects. I remember my mum getting angry with me one time because she wanted me to vacuum up the cobwebs. I thought that was very unkind to the spiders. I didn't think they wanted to be crushed inside a vacuum cleaner. But then it was taking me quite a long time to put them outside. My mum still remembers this. But one of the best things about becoming a Buddhist monastic is suddenly it's totally okay to spend quite a lot of time saving bugs and insects. And I realized that probably most days in the monastery, I am saving a few insects of all sorts of different kinds. I'm often asking, if there is something on the path, I help it finish its way across the road. I like picking up bees and putting them outside. And I've never been, stung by them. And I think, I make a joke because sometimes in the monastery there is also work to be done, and sometimes people say, "Oh, sister, are you sure you need to do this?" And then I say, "Oh, I'm investing in friends for my future lives. I want them to be my Dharma friends in future lives, and I will need all the help I can get in the future. So these are going to be my future friends. So I'm gonna help them now." But honestly, of the different things I do in the day, I think taking care of insects is literally one of the ways that I keep my reverence for life really alive every day. Like no being is too small. And every insect is a wonder. And we know that there is now what they call an insect apocalypse, that the populations are collapsing. So, if any of you are inspired and not too scared of spiders, please take it also as a Zen practice and an act of compassion to take care of the insects in your life, to see how we can help them. Our love is expressed in how we eat. At the beginning of the talk I said, there's nothing I can say that will not involve you changing, needing to change something. How we eat is one of the most powerful realms of action that you have available every day. Every day. We may feel powerless in so many realms. What can I, one individual, possibly do to help the planet? Well, one answer is every single meal you have a chance to help the planet. Every single meal. And don't think about efficiencies of scale and structures and systems. Every action counts. You are an actor, you are a consumer. We are in this machine and we can make a choice. And this is very, very powerful way to contribute. I remember our teacher being questioned about whether in the monastery we were doing enough on some ecological fronts, because in southern France, in rural France, it was really hard to find sustainable energy providers. It was very hard to have the recycling that we needed. There were a lot of challenges, and someone was being quite critical, and Tai turned to them and he was like, but do you still eat meat? Are you still eating cheese? Are you still drinking alcohol? And he's like, there can be a lot of violence in how we consume. And it is a very simple thing that we can change in our life, but it has a huge impact. And what's so important is the choices we make about how we consume. They can come from love and from joy. Even the monastics, we are mostly vegan, but we are not militantly vegan. I don't know in the Netherlands, but in the UK we have quite some militant vegans, and it can cause disharmony in our friendships, in our families. It can have some violence in it, even the way that we can be a bit militant about our diet. So we try to be mostly vegan, but we are not militant about it, and that gives us a lot of joy. We're so happy when we can eat a vegan meal. And I was recently in Italy, also for a teaching tour, and in Italy they don't understand veganism, they don't even understand vegetarianism. So all you can eat is omelette and cheese. So I had to eat so many eggs and cheese, I think enough for the whole year. But normally I prefer not to. But it's not that or that we monastics are too militant about it, but it gives us a lot of joy and a lot of peace to be able to eat a vegan diet. There's something I would like to share about being in touch with the beauty and the wonder of the natural world and allowing ourselves to love the earth. In our retreat last weekend, we were asked a question, which was, how can I take refuge and be nourished by the beauty of the earth when every time I open my awareness to the earth, this is the question. The young woman said, every time I open my awareness, all I can hear and feel is the pain, maybe the pollution that the trees are absorbing, or the destruction of woodlands and forests, maybe a solitary tree, a solo tree is not as happy as it would be in a forest. And this is a good question. In the climate movement, they speak about something called solastalgia. Solastalgia. It is the grief of the loss or the damage to a natural habitat, a natural oasis, a corner, a beautiful corner of the natural world that we love and that we'd like to enjoy. And when that is damaged or polluted or destroyed, we feel a very particular kind of grief, because not only has the place been lost, but we have lost also a place of refuge that we used to have. So for some of us it might be the woodland we played in as a child, or a river that we enjoyed that no longer exists, something like this. And in Buddhist meditation and our Zen tradition, we do have some responses to this. The first is to allow ourselves to hear the pain and the grief and the loss. To breathe with it, with compassion, to embrace that feeling as it expresses itself in our body, to accompany that feeling and not deny it and not try to numb it, but to allow that feeling to be there, to calm it in our body, and to see what that feeling has to teach us, to see what insights we can get from it. There's a wonderful line in the American series. I haven't watched the series, but I have seen this clip. It's called One Division. I don't know if any of you have seen it. And the line is, what is grief if not love persevering? What is grief if not love persevering? Grief comes from love wanting to continue. That is grief is there because love is there. And this is a very helpful contemplation when we become aware of a feeling of loss or sorrow or grief in relation to the planet. To allow that also, to see it also as a feeling of love persevering. And when we experience loss, the teaching in loss often is also to allow us to cherish what we have. Grief is sometimes sharper when we have regret, and the regret is often there because we didn't cherish what we had while we had it. And so the teaching in grief often and in loss is to cherish what we have, what we still have. And this is very important, especially for those of us in the younger generation, to cherish what we have, to allow that love to grow so that we can also know how to guard, safeguard and protect it. And this is the second part of the answer, which is that yes, it is true that the trees may be struggling with pollution perhaps, or lack of water or other things, but they are also still a wonder of life. Each leaf is still a miracle. Each flower is still a miracle. And this is the teaching on what we call in the Zen tradition appropriate attention. Appropriate attention. We direct our mind to things that are also true, and we don't allow it too much to drown in a narrow part of the truth. Pollution is a part of the truth. In fact, relative to the miracle of what a tree is over however many millions of years of evolution, the pollution is less significant than the miracle that is the tree, still adapting and still surviving and still expressing itself. We can enjoy the sound of the bell. I'd like to speak a bit about dreams and idealism. We need a very strong intention and aspiration to be able to be a source of energy and fuel for action, for social justice, for planetary justice, for peace. And that source of energy, this aspiration, it is something that we need to take care of, to nurture. Our idealism, we have to keep it alive. In Buddhism we say nothing can survive without food. So don't put our dreams and ideals kind of on the shelf and forget about it and delay it or postpone it and say something like, oh, when I have enough money, when I have a good job, when my main problems are sorted, then I will start to live my dreams. Our teacher and in our community, we really experience that our dream is something we have to keep alive every day and nurture every day, something to sustain. I don't know how many of us in the room now are activists. We've had a few different activists, quite a few joining our retreats and events so far. So I'm just going to assume that some of you are. It can be quite hard to keep our idealism alive, fueled by love, without leaning into anger and bitterness and resentment and frustration, and also without becoming disillusioned and disappointed. When we become monks and nuns, we also have some big ideals. We often come into the monastery wanting to live the most simple, peaceful life possible, to be a very kind and compassionate person. And we have a bit of training, a few months of training, and then our heads are shaved and we wear the robe, and we crash into the reality that we are still ourselves in the monastery. And we have a great lesson in idealism and reality. And I think if we become disillusioned, that's good, because the word disillusioned, it means we get rid of our illusions. In English, this word kind of means to be disappointed to be fundamentally disappointed in life. I'm disillusioned by life. You might hear that phrase. Very good. Because we want our 2 feet firmly on the ground, right where action and transformation is possible. And if we're an idealist, perhaps living in an ecological community, we're actually staying overnight in one of the eco-communities across the water. If we're living in an eco-community, or we're an activist, or we're in another kind of, maybe a humanitarian project, or we're engaged in social service, we may be driven by our ideals and we get disappointed by the reality. And mindfulness has a lot to contribute and to help and support us. Because often the first thing that we are disappointed by and disillusioned by is often ourselves. We have become exhausted. We have become impatient. Maybe our speech is not the kind of speech that we would like to have, and we become as much a victim of the situation and the environment as everyone else. And so matching the reality with our ideals has something to do with transforming our habits. We want to be able to respond differently to situations in our speech, in our actions, in our thinking. We want to defend our freedom and our boundaries while also being generous and loving. And this takes training. This is what I've learned in the monastery. It cannot happen through force of willpower. It takes training to transform our habits. And we use the insights of the Diamond Sutra to help us do this. Those insights I mentioned at the beginning. That we are not a separate self, for example. If it is hard for me to change my speech habits, that's because I have also inherited them from my parents and grandparents and from my environment. If a habit is hard to shift, maybe a habit around consuming, I inherited a very, very strong seed of craving from my father and his father. I know exactly where it comes from. So if I would like to handle my consuming, I have to engage with many generations of this habit and this energy of craving. I'm not a separate self. And if this habit is hard to shift, it's because it's not mine alone, and that makes it even more worthwhile to shift it. Because I'm not just a small me taking this action. I represent a whole lineage, and if I can transform this, I transform it on behalf of perhaps dozens, maybe hundreds of ancestors who were not able to transform it. And this kind of insight can give us a lot of energy and hope to be able to keep going even when we fall short of our ideals. Another insight that can be very helpful in terms of our dreams and our ideals is that when it comes to the kind of actions and engagements that can help our planet and also help future generations of humans who will still have to face a lot of challenges in generations to come, our way of responding in this lifetime is as important as what we do or achieve. Our way of handling difficult situations is also something that we will be training future generations to do. if we would like future generations to be calm in a crisis, we need to learn and train ourselves to be calm in this crisis. And if it is hard to be calm in this crisis, that is all the more reason why it's so important to learn it now, so it can be something that we can transmit to future generations. If we would like future generations to be able to cooperate and collaborate to find solutions to the crises of the climate, of the balance of the natural world, if we want them to collaborate and communicate, it means that in our lifetime we need to learn now how to collaborate and communicate well. Which means that when we have difficulties with a colleague, when in our activist group there is disharmony, when in our eco-community there is disharmony, or it's really difficult to work together and find agreement, that is why it is so important to do it. We have to learn these skills of compassionate listening, brave dialogue, to be able to embrace different views and different approaches, because that is exactly what future generations will also need to be able to do. So our way of being now is just as important as what we can do or achieve. I'd like to finish with a few words about collective engaged action. We may think, what does... No, I'll phrase it another way. Some people ask us, how are we as a community contributing to help address the current crises? And our answer is that we are creating in our monasteries and in our local sanghas in towns and cities around the world, we're creating communities of resistance. And the first thing that we are resisting is this endless striving and running of a kind of mindless consumerist society. We need to be able to create islands of peace where we can find our peace and freedom, so we're not dragged along on this machine, this conveyor belt, where we can stop, look deeply, and from a place of peace and compassion, radically change our way of living and consuming. And when we have islands, pockets of communities of resistance who are able to do this, to sit in peace, walk in peace, eat in peace, generate an energy of compassion, these are all preconditions for transforming our way of living. And these communities of resistance, it's a refuge for us in our engaged action to make a difference. And most of the people that come to our monasteries for retreats, and many, many thousands of people come every year, are in the helping professions, whether that's humanitarian workers for the Red Cross who are active in the Ukraine, or teachers, or therapists, or doctors and healthcare workers. We create islands of refuge so that we can touch the peace and compassion we need in order to serve in the ways we want to serve. And this is particularly important for activists. If we want to take care of the environment, we also have to take care of the environmentalist. We are not separate from our environment. That's the insight of the Diamond Sutra. In our tradition, we offer a very powerful pathway of engaged action that was born in the suffering of the Vietnam War, which is where our teacher developed a lot of the practices, even that we will be doing today. And we have an incredible code of engaged kind of ethics that we call the 14 mindfulness trainings that are really a very powerful pathway for especially young people who are engaged in the transformation of society, to have an ethical code to accompany us in difficult situations. And yesterday we had a chance to welcome more people who are committing to this path of training of the 14 mindfulness trainings. And for those of us that might start to already be familiar with the practice in our tradition, and especially those of you who are young, we hope in the coming years to be able to train many more of you in these 14 mindfulness trainings. We call it a path of a bodhisattva. And we need this kind of ethical core to be able to guide our action. I'm aware that I'm coming to the end of my time, and I will just wrap up with sharing about a new initiative that we have in our community across the Atlantic in North America, which is to create what we call beloved community circles, which are kind of action pods that are associated with but separate from our regular meditation sanghas. And these action pods are of about 3 to 8 mindfulness practitioners who also want to be intensely engaged in action to be of service, in particular to climate justice and racial justice. And it's a very exciting new initiative, and the first pilots just started a few weeks ago. And it's a model to be able to base on the kind of practices that we are doing today, to nourish ourselves and heal ourselves with these practices, while also being in a group with 3 to 8 others for at least 6 to 12 months, meeting once or twice a month, sometimes online or if possible in person, and then supporting each other in our engaged action with the energy of mindfulness. And in this program there is a model of trainings to be able to start these kind of action pods, or mindful action pods. So there's a kind of onboarding training, and then once the pods are running, then there is continual training that we can do to handle our strong emotions, to handle our frustrations, and to keep our engaged action, to keep the spiritual dimension alive while we take action. And having been in the Netherlands for the last 2 or 3 weeks, I think that the Netherlands would be a great location for some more pilot action pods. These beloved community circles is what they've been called in America. Maybe in the Netherlands you can have a better name that makes more sense here. But I think this is a wonderful thing that our community could start to explore. And it's a wonderful way to apply mindfulness in action and to learn and grow spiritually while being of service to ourselves and to the world around us. So I would like to end here and thank you for your very attentive and kind listening. We can enjoy 3 sounds of the bell and come back to our breathing, knowing that the next thing that will happen will be very delicious.